We are going to hear now from the player side of things, because we did hear several of the owners discuss the relationship between the players and owners, much improved over the years in the NBA, and it really does drive valuation as well. So let's see, we should have Michele Roberts, the executive director of the NBA Players Association, joining us soon. Hopefully she pops up, because you cannot look at, I see her coming in now.
Hey there.
Hey, Michele, how are you?
I'm well, Scott. Good to see you. Good to be here. Yeah,
great to see you. A lovely background, by the way. I love it. Mine is the boring one, but you've got great stuff in your office.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
I'm asking everybody, because of what we've heard down the line from Adam on down, what are the one or two things that either you grab for a pencil or you're just tucking away in the banks there as sticking with you?
Sticking with me.
Just in terms of what's been said so far by Adam and the owners.
Well, and let's be clear, I am delighted that these teams are continuing to grow in value. I mean, I don't hold it against anybody. I think it's great. It simply underscores how popular this game is, and that's something that obviously the players have an interest in encouraging. You know what? I'm sitting here, and I'm not a player, but I'm sitting here feeling a little jealous, a little left out of the ability to enjoy ownership as these men have described it to us all morning. Look, the passion that Steve and Mark and Wick and Ted have shown for the game is something that is shared by our players. What we don't share is having an equity stake in the teams. And look, we got a collective bargaining agreement that says we can't, and hopefully down the road we'll make some changes. But I will, and the players will be the last to suggest that we want to see the game's value or the team's values in any way diminish. But it sure would be nice to be able to go to the party.
Now, where is that in sort of discussion just among the players? And in the realm of reality, is that pie in the sky, or is that really something you think in future agreements that could become a real partnership where the players share? And I don't even know how that would work. I know there's a million details that would have to be, worked out, and would probably keep Ronnie Klempner in his office for 7 months straight. But how do you see that in the realm of possibility that players and owners would be equity partners in the league and the teams themselves?
Look, I don't ever think anything is impossible, so I'll never say that even this one is. There's no question but that there's some issues that have to be worked out. I mean, there are some genuine conflict questions that I think are legitimate, and we'd have to sort through. But I'm a lawyer, and I know that conflicts can be managed. So sure, there'll be some work that Ron and my legal team would have to do to get it done, but it can get done. Are the players interested in it? In a word, yes. Every year when you guys come out with a valuation, I inevitably get a call from some player, probably new to the league, that says, Michele, what does that mean to me? And at the end of the day, I kind of say not much, because you don't have an equity stake in the team. And then, with recent team sales, and most players know it, but there's always some player that says, how can I buy a piece of a team? Sometimes it's their team. So the desire is there among the players, and it seems to me that unless, and I don't believe the owners would be adverse to the concept of player.
Well, now that we're opening it up to all sorts of institutional capital.
Well, that's my point. I was
money.
I was listening to this notion of private equity being able to get a piece of these teams, and again, I guarantee you, Scott, when this is out, if it happens, I will have players complain bitterly that, wow, we helped create this wealth, we have helped create this value, and then some venture guy can come in, or some private equity investor can come in, and I can't. Yes, I do think that it's something that if there's mutual desire to see it happen, can happen. It's not right now. There's a lot on the table. This is not one of the issues on the table, but there will be another collective bargaining negotiation, and I would not be at all surprised. In fact, I'd be surprised if it was not part of the discussion.
What has
Michele,
been communicated to the league, and what has been the response on this issue? I'm just curious if they know that this is perhaps where you're going, and what have they said?
I will say, and again, I never like to talk out of school. During our last CBA negotiations, we touched on it, but it was pretty clear, at least on our side of the V, that it was not something that was going to be doable for that cycle. My relationship with Adam is such that he has never, and I hope he never will say never. I mean, he and the other owners on the labor committee have always managed to allow that we can negotiate. There's some things that were not going to be available during that last stage of negotiations. But what I'm saying now is I guarantee you no surprise to any governors or any members of the NBA staff that are listening. I think we all know that the interest is there. And I will allow that there are some issues that have to be worked through. I mean, we've got a salary cap, and that cap says some things about why we can't have equity share in these teams. Having said that, there's nothing that's impossible, and there are ways to do it that don't have to impact the kinds of concerns regarding the cap and regarding conflicts that currently have predominated the argument.
Michele, we've heard a lot today about basketball-related businesses that owners are leveraging their teams to expand into, and businesses that wouldn't exist, or certainly wouldn't exist in the size and scope that are being built if not for the basketball-related business. So on a similar point to what you're saying in terms of players maybe potentially one day sharing in the equity of the teams themselves, I'm wondering, how do you keep tabs on the explosive growth of what was once ancillary? Ted called it ancillary, but now I think that doesn't, at least linguistically, do justice to these related businesses that can be worth billions of dollars in some cases. How do you make sure that that's captured when appropriate in basketball-related income, at least based on current collective bargaining, in terms of a rubric prior to when players are actual owners in the teams?
Yeah, and you said the magic words, basketball-related income, which by the terms of our CBA, we're entitled to 51% of. How do we keep track of that income? By spending a lot of time looking at these so-called ancillary businesses. We have a BRI. We audit teams and the league annually, and much of the fight that takes place, and I use fight in quotes, takes place in those discussions relate to whether the revenue generated by those businesses, which undeniably would not enjoy the kind of success that they do, but for the team, what component of that revenue is fairly placed within the BRI pot so that the players can get their share of it. Again, we love it. I used to live in DC. I loved watching the Wizards come into the downtown DC and build up that city and generate a lot more income for the city and for the team.
Don't be fooled, Peter. She's a Knicks fan.
And then in any event, we encourage the governors to utilize our game to create more revenue. We just want some of it too. And so, put aside not having a stake in the teams, we do pretty much have to spend a lot of energy convincing the teams and the league that some of that income, if not half of that income that's generated in those businesses, is appropriately shared with the players.
And I'm also wondering, on a related point, if you could speak a little bit to how labor stability has enabled rising valuations. It seems to me, from examining when there have been these dramatic rises in valuations, they have comported with periods that are far removed from work stoppages and lockouts and things of that nature. So I'm wondering, to those ends, the relationship between labor stability and growth in team value.
When I first got the job, I looked back at the lockouts, and I thought I couldn't figure out how in the world you'd leave that kind of money on the table in an effort to do whatever you're trying to do. Well, I allowed myself to believe that and I believe it. I don't want to be too skeptical, but I allowed myself to believe that the owners believed that the amount of money that would be lost in connection with that lockout was worth what would be made in the long run if they were able to get the changes that they wanted made. and I assumed that that was going to be the same mindset that the league and the owners had when we had our last round of negotiations. Well, I did the math, and it occurred to me that no one, and including governors, wanted to lose money. I mean, who does? And that when I gauge what I believed would be what the owners were going to be requesting for the players, we made a sort of a cost benefit analysis. Are we able to meet in the middle here? Because it's a value to you not only to not lose money, but to have labor peace. My view has always been that I want us to together, and which is why I don't mind the tag that's sometimes associated with Adam and I as being partners, or the players and the owners being partners. As partners, we need to be engaged in the business of growing the pie. And as partners, we can only do that if we're actually working. So, I don't think for 1 second anyone would suggest that if it was the take that the union and the league were always at it, I would be concerned if I were a governor about the future revenue, knowing that there has been labor peace, and to the extent they believe that there can continue to be labor peace, of course that adds to the value of the teams. And so I would like to think that we've seen our last lockout, and one of the ways we can at least perhaps realize that is to continue to find ways to keep each other happy, and everyone gets rich.
Well, Michele, Wick Grossbeck practically waxed poetic about the relationship between the fans and the players, understanding that the players are the product. And I'm curious your take from a brand development, and you guys took your group licensing back in the last CBA, understanding the value of those rights. Which brands stand out? Are there any instances in the league where the player brand supersedes the team brand? And how does the ebb and flow and rise and fall of dollars and cents fall into that ebb and flow?
One of the things that Wick said, and I was doing other things, but I heard him say, and it's funny, and I do compare us to the NFL in this regard. There are cities like Boston where they don't care who's on the team. They love that team. Having said that, Wick pointed out that the minute Shaq showed up, right, revenue went up the roof. I was in law school in California, Berkeley, and you couldn't give away a ticket to see the Warriors. Steph Curry and the company have made the Warriors they're the second highest franchise. So if anyone has any doubt, but that the personality of our players have a huge impact on the value of a team, then they're not watching, because it is a player-driven business. The excitement surrounding our players is what's, I think, been the reason that there's been so much excitement surrounding our game. And with the influx of international players, their popularity is going to allow for the game's international popularity to flourish. It's not, the NBA as a brand is of course a phenomenal value, but the creation of that brand comes from the Michael Jordans, the Magic Johnsons, the Larry Birds, and the future players that who preceded them and who are going to precede LeBron and Chris and Steph. It's our players that contribute to the brand, and I don't think there's any argument about that. I think we celebrate that, and it does distinguish us from other sports, and will allow us. And I agree with, I can't remember who said it. And maybe in the next 8 or 10 years, we're going to be knocking on soccer's door in a really meaningful way.
Right. For people who don't understand that group license dynamic, I'll give an example. Like, for instance, if you want an NBA video game, you must go to the league and negotiate a contract for team and league marks. And you must also go to the Players Association for the right to use the players. And I wonder, if I was creating that game, and I'm not sure what the answer is right now, which do I need more? Would I watch the basketball game where I could play 3-on-3 with the players I know? Or would it be sort of nameless, faceless players, but it's the Knicks versus the Lakers versus the Celtics?
And there's a way in which, as the values of these teams rise, the value of the players' intellectual property rises in tandem with that because of this separate dynamic. So I think Scott's right that extremely important that was a factor that in terms of the last collective bargaining agreement, that the players took that back. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering, Michele, when in the past, when the subject of rising valuations have come up and players gripe, perhaps understandably so, about not sharing in that growth, owners often say, well, I'm the owner of the team, I'm taking all the risk. And that's often scoffed at, particularly during recessions, because sports have tended to be recession-proof. But what I'm wondering is, in COVID, does that dynamic change at all? The revenues, as we showed, were down nearly 10% for the franchises collectively between 2018, 2019 and 1920. Now they're going to be down far more than that with no fans in the building. Is there a point to that kind of weathered argument that it might be the boy who cried wolf that has been used so much in the past this time around? Or I can tell from your skeptical look, you're probably going to say no.
Well, you're right. Let me say a couple of things. First off, this notion that it's only the owners that take the risks, I've always found personally offensive, because it's not true. Mm-hmm. Every time a player goes on that court, he risks.
For the record, I was quoting what the owners said.
I know that, and I understand that, Peter. I just want to make sure that everyone understands that.
That's the power of your look, Michele.
Right. I mean, so it's just nonsense. Players take a risk whenever they get on that court, and they know that they do that, knowing that there could be a season-ending injury, and their ability to make money with their bodies as basketball players, they place at risk every time they play. Even when they practice, they take a risk. So that's nonsense. Two, we okay, let us share in the risk. Let us share in the equity. I mean, that's been a retort that I've heard from players as well. And as far as COVID, don't for one second assume that the only people losing money during this process are the owners. Our players sustained a significant revenue drop because we weren't able to play as many games as we could during the last season. All that money that was not made in gate receipts and concessions because we couldn't play in front of fans, half of that money that was lost belonged to us. And the same going forward. So we know our players are going to lose money. They lost money last season. They're going to lose money this season. And again, it's no one's fault. It's a virus. But as Adam said, everyone believes, and your numbers bear it out, that these teams, the value of these teams is going to come back better. The money that my players have lost, they're never going to get that money back. They're never going to get that money back. They're not going to be able to satisfy themselves if they've got an asset that if they choose to, and I heard the guys say, well, I'm never going to sell my team. That's cool. You don't have to. But if you wanted to, or you had to, you've got an asset that's of value. Our players don't have that same security. So, I'm not suggesting that owners are sitting back fat and happy and we're doing all the work and they should therefore just give us a piece of the pie. I love the owners of the NBA. These guys are, I love Ballmer. I was hysterical, laughing, watching him. I've known Wick for a number of years. So this is not personal. It's not a suggestion that they don't work very hard to create value for their teams and their other businesses. It's just, in my view, and again, we'll talk about it in the appropriate forum, that the players' contribution to the creation of the value of these teams shouldn't end, or their enjoyment shouldn't end simply because of the money that they make when they sign the contract, particularly when the money is capped because of our salary cap. So, we can talk about it. Look, one idea I've had that no one seems to, I don't want to say no one seems to enjoy, is if you don't want to upset the cap, or you don't think that there are conflict issues that can be resolved, then why don't we talk about some sort of equity stake that the PA would have in these teams? The PA is obviously something that supports players. No, it wouldn't probably result in individual checks to players, but it would support the union and the work that these players need to have done on their behalf and want to have done in their communities. There's a way, in other words, for players to enjoy equity in these teams that may be non-traditional. And the final thing I'll say, and this is what kind of drives me a little bit nuts, And again, this business is unique in that it doesn't operate like every other private industry. But all of us are familiar with these employee stock options and compensation packages where employees can get a piece of a company that they work for. No one thinks there's anything evil about that. In fact, it's sometimes viewed as a way to encourage more employee enthusiasm about the success of the venture. If I join a board, I wouldn't have done anything for that company. I walk in and they give me an opportunity to purchase stock. We've got to figure out a way, even in an environment that's as artificial as the NBA and professional sports, to allow for some enjoyment by the people that are creating the value in the entities. And it may be a little different from the way we do it on the private side, but I still think that there's an opportunity for us to talk about and think about and ultimately resolve what I believe to be an inequity in our system.
You know who I would go to come up with that system? Maybe our next guest, Michele.
Okay.
Don Cornwell over at PJT Partners and Lyle A's at Verance Capital. That's what these guys do. There's an entire cottage industry of banking surrounding sports and entertainment. I know you know that well. So, Michele, thank you so much for joining us. I always appreciate and love chatting with you.
All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. I'll play with the 11.
You got it.
I love it.